What's causing them to get to the breaking point? With me now is Tiffany Hawk, a former flight attendant who left the job after 5 years. Tiffany is now a travel writer. Also with me is Renee Foss. She is a 26-year veteran flight attendant who put her experiences in a book called Around the World in a Bad Mood. Great title for your book, by the way. Tiffany, when you first heard about the situation with Steven Slater, what was your reaction as a former flight attendant?
Well, I was shocked at the way he left, but I wasn't at all surprised that a flight attendant and a passenger as well had completely lost it. Flying has gotten so stressful and exhausting for everyone, especially crew members.
Did you ever want to pull the emergency chute and slide down and go?
I never thought of that, but I can vividly remember standing in the back galley, pressing my face to the window, wishing I had a parachute out from one flight. But I wouldn't have been afraid. I'm normally a wimp. I could have jumped out of that plane.
What was the worst thing that you had to put up with as a flight attendant?
Well, I really think it's the fatigue these days. After 9/11 and then continually each year, it gets worse and worse. I don't think people in the public realize that flight attendants are expected to work 14, depending on the airline, 15, 16, 20 hours a day with only a few hours rest. Right. They only need 8 hours rest from when the plane lands till it takes off again. So you might only get 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night. My husband's a pilot in the Air Force. They have to have 12 hours rest, but pilots and flight attendants don't have that. They get so little sleep, they're effectively drunk. Really, for 18 to 24 hours of wakefulness, and it's the equivalent of a blood alcohol level of 0.1, which is over the legal limit to drive in every state.
You know, as somebody who's sitting back there in the cabin for hours and hours every week, you just really made me feel so very comfortable. Thank you for really enhancing my whole flying experience. Renee, tell me, you've been in the business now 26 years. How has flying changed over that period of time?
Well, it has definitely changed in that it's not as glamorous as it once was. I started in 1985, and it was somewhat glamorous back then, but now I look back on my mother. She was also a flight attendant in the 50s, and I like to kind of compare my mother's time to my time, and I like to say she wore white gloves and I'm wearing rubber gloves.
Wow.
She learned to serve lobster thermidor tableside on the aircraft. I'm learning to put handcuffs on unruly passengers. So the glamour is definitely gone. Have you ever experienced a situation where a passenger got out of hand? Yes, I have.
What happened?
Well, my personal experience, I mean, there are so many. I guess it depends how you define out of hand. I mean, I've had people swear at me. I've had people yell at me. One gentleman in first class, which sort of surprised me when I told him we had to check his bag because there wasn't going to be enough room, and that's the policy. He was so angry, and it was so weird because he was in a suit and tie. He was a first-class passenger. He threw the garment bag right at me, but I'm quick on my feet. I jumped out of the way. But the fact was, wow, what would drive a grown man in a sort of civilized suit and such to act that way? And I think it's this frustration with the system.
Yeah, the system is a problem because, I mean, people are getting to the airport early, then they find out their plane's delayed, then they go through security, which means basically undressing and putting everything, and
yeah.
That's another hassle. And then they get to the gate, and they're told the gate's been changed, and then they get to the right gate, and it goes on and on and on. So let me say something to both of you. I think flight attendants are some of the most underappreciated people in America today. I really say that with all my heart. Because sometimes you get treated like high-altitude bartenders when, in fact, your primary job is protecting the passengers and the first line of safety. Tell me about the training that you received as a flight attendant on the issues of protecting the passengers.
You do go through, it depends on the airline how long it's going to be, between generally 5 to 9 weeks, all day, every day, training of fighting fires. I fought 2 fires in flight. Evacuating the plane, dealing with anything from decompression to medical emergencies that we have on board. And one of the astounding things I've rarely had, occasionally you have the really crazy passenger that's out of control, but what astounds me is the passengers that don't realize there's anything going on besides their need for a beverage. I had a passenger who was screaming at me because he didn't have his meal on time, but the reason he didn't is I was on my knees in the aisle scooping up his son's vomit. A friend of mine was in the aisle getting ready to give CPR to a man, and she was tapped on the shoulder, and the passenger wanted more cookies.
You are kidding me.
No.
I have one I can top that.
I would love to hear.
We had a death on board, and this does happen sometimes, and they had to take the body to
You didn't kill the person.
No.
It wasn't one of those passengers. I just want to make sure.
I'm not guilty.
Okay.
But,
Jay's going to get that confession out of you later.
I want a lawyer. I need a lawyer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, anyway, it's not really funny, but this did happen. We had a body in the galley, and a passenger came in and said, "What's going on? Can I get a ginger ale?" But, I mean, I think they saw us take the body to the back of the plane, but yet this person just thought that whatever he needed was, kind of to back up what you say, more important than what was going on in the collective environment, you know?
We have a list, by the way, of some passenger complaints, the top passenger complaints. See if you recognize any of these.
It's bigger over there.
Renee, let's see. One of them is luggage charges and added fees, standing in line for security, lack of food on flights, and crying babies and unruly kids.
Right.
Do you feel like that's what ticks off the passengers mostly?
Yes, I do, and I think I'd like to say that 95% of the passengers are great. They realize they're on it's public transportation. They have a good comprehension of it. But it's that 5% that don't really understand it. And I don't know if that comes from a sense of entitlement or they've just had a bad day, but it's really true, particularly about the luggage right now. That seems to be the big thing because they've started adding fees for luggage. So then that makes the people want to bring more on board because they have to pay to check their luggage. So they're trying to bring all these things like your Winnebago or your bathtub, and it doesn't fit in the overhead bin, and we can't really help you because there's limited space.
See, if I ran the airline, the first thing I do, if you got to charge for a bag, I'd charge for the ones that you bring on, not the ones that you check. Because it's the ones that you bring on that cause the trouble. It takes forever to get in and out of the plane.
Right.
People are banging you as they come down the aisle, knocking you in the head when they put it up above you. They bring stuff they should never bring on because they're too cheap to pay the fee. I'm sorry, but that ticks me off a lot.
Well, you should go into politics. You should be in politics.
I tried that, too. I want us to look at flight attendant complaints. This is what the flight attendants say really chaps them. Off-duty parents, oversized stuffed carry-ons, gripes about seating, not following instructions, and complaints about the high price of flying, like you guys have anything to do with the cost.
Right.
So of those, which one is the one that most causes you a little bit of grief, Tiffany?
I think when I was working, even before all of the added fees with the bags, boarding has always been the most difficult part. Trying to fit those bags in the overhead bin, there just isn't enough room. And now flights are just more full than they ever have been.
And you know what, I want to say something about boarding, because I would agree with Tiffany that that's the most stressful time. And flight attendants generally are not paid for that time on the ground. We're only paid for when the engines are running. So at that point, we're not even on the clock, so to speak. And that seems to be where a lot of the stress comes in, is trying to get everybody seated. People aren't seated together, people don't have a place for their bags, etc. So it is definitely, I think, the most difficult time for the flight attendant.
And it's considered part of your layover as well. When you have those minimum rest periods, all that boarding and deplaning, and that's all part of your rest.
No wonder the flight attendants are surly during the boarding. They're not even getting paid. Renee, Tiffany, thank you both very much. It's a great, great story. Here's one final word. When you are on an airplane and there's a mechanical problem, don't yell at the flight attendant. They didn't break the plane. They don't change the weather. They didn't set the prices. There's a whole lot of things. My advice, be nice to the flight attendants. It gets you a lot more than it does being mean to them. Trust me, I'm on those planes with them, and I have a lot of respect for what these people do. They are highly trained professionals, and they should be treated that way. And we will be right back.
Thank you.